Okay, tremendous. Welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for being here as we continue our journey through Sichos Haran. I hope everybody had an incredible Pesach. Baruch Hashem, it was very beautiful for us in the States. And happy to be back here at our current home, not our real home, but our current home in London. Be'ezras Hashem, we, along with everybody else, should be back in Eretz Yisrael speedily. Be'ezras Hashem. But we continue our journey with Sichos Haran 137. And we're in that part of the Sefer, like we've been learning, where Rabbi Nachman goes through the various teachings that are already printed in Sefer Likutei Moharan. It's really Reb Nosson, rather, and gives sort of the background, different information that wasn't recorded in the teachings themselves, that had to do anecdotally with the context of the teachings and what happened before the teachings were given, different clarifications in some of the teachings, especially the shorter ones, that we are now going to continue along that journey. So we take a look at Sichos Haran Kuf Lamed Zayin, which Rebbe Nosson tells us is Shaykh LaHaTorah Ma'os Ar Rasha Tevis V'chulu. That money is the Rasha Tevis of Avera, or Ein Mechabe. Let me just look at the end, because he brings it at the end. Right, Ve'ein Avera Mechabe Torah. Rabbi Nachman says in the Likutei Moharan that tzedakah is the concept of limud ha-Torah. Rabbi Nachman says specifically the kind of Torah that supports Torah study, that supports Torah scholars, that supports Torah publications. Torah that supports any kind of learning is, in a certain sense, like the learning itself, because we know the Chazal tell us, im ein kamach ein Torah. If there's no financial backing, if there's no foundation, so then there can't be any Torah that's learned. That's the way of the world. And so the Rebbe says that tzedakah, like that, is considered like Torah. And although mitzvahs are able to be overwhelmed by the averos and the negative energies of different averos and different deviant practices that a person is engaged with vis-a-vis the will of Hashem, that can be covered over by the averos. So mitzvahs can be covered over by averos, but the Gemara tells us very clearly, the Gemara in Saita, that ein avera mechabet Torah, that although mitzvahs can be sort of covered over, concealed, or obscured by a person's averos, that is not the case with Torah, and Rabbi Nachman applies that to tzedakah that a person gives to support Torah. Okay, so this, and Reb Nosson actually over there in Likutei Moharan, in Torah Reish Daled, toward the very, very end of Sefer Likutei Moharan, Chelek Aleph, Volume 1, also known as Likutei Moharan Kama, the first volume. So over there, Reb Nosson says that there was a story that was related to the teaching of this Torah, but Reb Nosson says, I didn't record it here, but over here it's recorded in Sichos Haran. So here Reb Nosson embellishes and gives a little bit of the broader context. V'siper mikoydem maisa. And Reb Nosson says that prior to the teaching of this particular revelation, that tzedakah that's given to Talmidei Chachamim shares the same energy of Torah, which cannot be extinguished, cannot be concealed, cannot be obscured and removed by an avera. Rabbi Nachman told the following story. Mishnei Anashim B'nei Anurim, there were two young men, Shayibir Achas, who lived in one particular city, V'hay B'neiam Avav Iskashras Gadol, and they had a very, very deep and very abiding and wonderful relationship. Pam Achas, one time, Ra Echad Mehem B'chaveri Shanata B'derech HaYashar Ksas V'asa Eza Davar Shaloi Kahagin. With time, it emerged that one of the friends saw that the other one was not the miderech hayashar, was acting in ways that were not aligned with the proper path, with a path of emunah, with a path of connection to Hashem, with a path of Torah and mitzvahs. And he did something that he shouldn't have done. The chashab, and he thought to himself, mikrahu, so it happened. He slipped. He made a mistake, but it's just, this is not really who he is. This is not who he's become. This is not a feature that's just a fault, and that's not really reflective of his general lifestyle. But after some more time, he saw something worse. That he was really transgressing and shameless about it. So he recognized that this is not a healthy relationship for him. He realized that this is something that could potentially become a negative influence. Maybe he wasn't so strong or strong enough to try to help his friend. And so he removed himself completely from the scene. After a while, Afterwards, as the days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years, and life unfolded, both of them left their circumstances of having relied on their in-laws for financial sustenance, which is generally the case in the first few years, and they went on their own way. And the person who had seen his friend have such a terrible spiritual descent, all of a sudden starts to see that he's doing very well financially. He's Ashanasa Asher Gadol, he became very, very, very wealthy. And the original person, this person who had separated him from his friend because he saw that the friend was going in not the best path, he became very poor. He became impoverished. And as you might imagine, this caused him to have questions in Emunah. And he started to feel this sense of complaint against Hashem. Because he said to himself, I know for myself that this is a balavera. This is a person that's not living in alignment with Torah, not on the level of Maisa, not on the level of Dibur, not on the level of Machshava, and not even on the level of wanting to do better. This is the there's a big difference between a person who struggles from time to time, but they want to do better, and a person that turns this into a lifestyle. That's a completely different story. So how could it be that this person was rewarded by Shamayim, that he has such a plentiful and financially stable, a financially successful experience, and I, says this person, I am an ani gadol, I'm very impoverished. Like, why is that fair? How is that true? Why has this person been blessed with so much plenty if I myself know all the reasons that he should have been? If anything, it should have been switched. The roles should have been switched. He should be impoverished as a result of his averos. That's the consequence, and I should be financially stable. That I separated myself from him because I don't want to live that kind of lifestyle. One time, Rabbi Nachman tells us, Ra'a b'makam echad, he saw in a particular place, but it becomes clear from context that it wasn't like a physical space in this world. He saw a vision, which is going to become relevant for one of the later teachings of today's shiur. He saw b'makam echad, he saw some kind of vision in some spiritual space. Kat achas, a certain group of entities, doesn't say people, a group, kat achas, just a group of beings. They were making a lot of noise, and they had tons of money, tons of coins, maybe in a sack, and they were shaking it around and making lots of noise with all this money. And he came close to them. And they told him, don't touch this money, this is not yours. This money belongs to your ex-friend, right? This friend that he had been friends with in his former good days, that he had separated himself from this person. This is his money, this is not your money, so stay away, this is not yours. Amar, so he said to himself, now is the best time, so now I can finally ask my question. If they're the ones that have the money that's going to end up by my friend, why was he zoche and I was not zoche when I'm doing what I'm supposed to do and he's not doing what he's supposed to do? So he asked them, why is he the beneficiary of all of this funds? He's going to be receiving all this money. I saw with my own eyes that this person is a balavera. So they answered him very simply. From the day that both of you detached yourselves from financial dependence on your in-laws, you couldn't have known this. But the fact is that even though he had struggled in the past, and it could be, it doesn't say here that he became a tzaddik, it could be that he's still struggling, and it could be that he's still acting in certain ways that are unbecoming and not aligned with the will of Hashem. But I want to let you know, he established for himself kava'itim la Torah. He established for himself time to study Torah consistently every day. He accepted upon himself, like without any exception. Something that he received, he will never, ever, ever deviate from this, every single day to learn a certain set amount. You might not be doing the averos he's doing, but you are not either committed to daily Torah study. Even though the person is dealing with averos, but still they are blessed financially, because the Gemara in Saita says, Ki avera mechabe mitzvos, while avera can be mechabe, can extinguish the merit or whatever channel is open into that realm of financial plenty through mitzvos, ein avera mechabe Torah. But the avera is not able to extinguish the Torah. So Rabbi Nachman says, what did this have to do with the money then? So here he brings that the Rashi Tevos, that the opening letters of Ve'ein Avera Mechabe Torah, that Avera does not distinguish Torah, is Rashi Tevos Ma'os. Has the Rashi Tevos, the opening letters of the word Ma'os, which of course means money, and therefore his friend was the beneficiary of Ma'os, even though he had committed Avera, because he had that daily commitment to Torah, which is very powerful. So again, with all of these things, is it a blanket rule? Is this something you can rely on, that if you accept upon yourself every single day to learn Torah, I or anybody or Rabbi Nachman lahavdil, any tzaddik, can promise you, or any person can promise you, that this will mean financial success? You and I both know that isn't true, because how many Talmidei Chachamim are there that learn plenty of Torah every day and they weren't blessed in this way? So we like to say there's never any blanket ironclad rule. But these are good pieces of information to onboard, because if circumstances do align themselves in the proper way, it might just be true for you. And I think obviously, we have to also remind ourselves of the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Al tiyu ka'avadam ha'mishamshim esarav ha'manas l'kabel pras, that we should not intend in our Torah study and whatever it is that we're taking on ourselves, that we expect some kind of reward for it. Chazal wanted us in a relational consciousness. I spoke a little bit about this yesterday morning in the Keser Shem Tov shiur, which is online already on YouTube, where the intention is relationship. The intention is what you get out of it, not like what you might get out of it. It's what you get out of it. It's the schar mitzvah, is the mitzvah itself, is the building of a relationship, is the benefit of being a person that's plugged into a deeper reality multiple times a day, whether it's through our tefillos, whether it's through our mitzvahs, whether it's through our study of Torah. But by the same token, apparently in this setting, in the context of this teaching, even if a person is stuck in certain behaviors that are maladapted from a spiritual perspective, ein avera mechabe Torah, that a person who is connected to Torah, it just might be the proper skula, or even beyond the skula, the opening up of the door that can bring a lot of financial shefa into a person's life, irrespective of whatever else they're going through, because Rabbi Nachman is revealing that the Rashi Tevos of Ve'ein Avera Mechabe Torah, that the Avera is not able to extinguish Torah study, is Rashi Tevos Ma'os, and that might be an amazing skula to open up the gates for financial sustenance. Can't promise, but it might just be that element that's missing in our lives, a daily commitment to Torah. And if we read this Sicha in the context of the teaching in Likutei Moharan, that the Sicha comes to expound, so you'll remember, like we said in the beginning, that Rabbi Nachman was actually not only speaking about Torah study per se, but the Rebbe is also speaking about supporting Torah, specifically tzedakah that's given to support the study of Torah, the development of Torah. And I'll add humbly, if it's Torah that's spreading Geula consciousness, if it's Torah that's actually effective, that's really moving the world forward, that's helping people increase their emunah, that's helping people increase their midos tovos, that kind of Torah is, we can't imagine, giving tzedakah to support that kind of teaching, to support that kind of, the publication of those kinds of publications. Obviously I have a vested interest, full disclosure, because that's my business, that's my job, and that's how I make parnasa, but it's a total side thing. Even if I didn't have any money at all, I couldn't do anything else, so I promise you I'm not in it for the money. There's not that much money, but beside for that, I'm in it because I believe in it. I believe that this is my mission in this world. But certainly money that's given to support that kind of teaching and that kind of spreading of those kinds of teachings, unbelievable, mamish unbelievable. So a daily commitment either to the Torah study or to supporting Torah can open up tremendous gates in Shemayim, and that's what we're learning here in Sichos Haran Kuf Lamed Zayin. Here we move on to the next teaching, which is Sichos Haran Kuf Lamed Ches 138. And here Rabbi Nassan records from Rabbi Nachman that Shamati mipiv HaKadosh, I heard from his holy mouth, when Rabbi Nachman was revealing a teaching in Likutei Moharan Siman Reish Lamed Daled 234, where he speaks about the benefit of saying stories about tzaddikim. Incredible benefit and spiritual benefit of doing so. Va'amar Az, and Rabbi Nachman said, Shehu ba'asme zichron levracha, that Rabbi Nachman himself, Iker hisayrusa la'avodas Hashem yisbarach be'emes, his primary catalyst, which is an incredible thing. What brought Rabbi Nachman along the journey of being a person who was so deeply connected to Hashem, so deeply, deeply, deeply bound to that realm where he was drawing down futuristic, like Ruach HaKodesh insights that all of us are going to need today in our lives to be able not only to survive, but to thrive. Rabbi Nachman's own inspiration, Iker Sayrusay la'avodas Hashem yisbarach be'emes, haya al yedei sipurei ma'asiyos mitzaddikim. That's what did it for him. It was stories about tzaddikim that inspired him, that lifted his sights, that gave him the capacity to imagine what he could accomplish, who he could become. The Sipur, and Rabbi Nachman told Reb Nassan about his youth, growing up, shebebeis aviv v'imai, that in the house of his parents, which was also the house of the Baal Shem Tov himself, because somehow Rabbi Nachman was actually born in the home of the Baal Shem Tov in Mezhbej, that was inherited by his parents. All of the different tzaddikim were there in that place with all of their chassidim, I'm sure, that came to Mezhbej and specifically stayed at the house of Rabbi Nachman. And we're going to see later on in Sichos Haran, the Chernobler, the Ma'arei Nayim, among many other tzaddikim, met Rabbi Nachman when he was a youth, and the things that they said about him. So they would all come to Mezhbej. The Baal Shem Tov, of course, is buried there, along with many other tzaddikim there in the Ohel of the Baal Shem Tov in that cemetery. Actually, interestingly enough, if anybody has the privilege of going, now it's difficult, but to go to visit that place and to daven at those kfarim, so right outside of the Ohel of the Baal Shem Tov is actually the burial place of Rabbi Nachman's brother, his name was Rabbi Yaakov. His name was Rabbi Yaakov. They called him Rabbi Yaakov HaMeis, Rabbi Yaakov the deathly one. He was nifter very young, and he had a very, very sallow, a very sickly physiognomy all his life. He was very, very ill, and this was his appellation. It was called Rabbi Yaakov HaMeis, and it's just interesting to know. Rabbi Nachman's brother is buried right outside the Ohel, along the path, right as you're turning into the Ohel. You'll see over there, it says, the brother of Rabbi Nachman of Breslev. But be that as it may, this was the place where all the tzaddikim came to Mezhbej, because that was the makom of the Baal Shem Tov. Rubam kekulam, and most of them, his achsenu bebeis aviv zal, they would all come to be guests, and they were sort of invited to stay at the home of Rabbi Nachman's father. Of course, his name was Simcha, and his mother, who was, of course, called Fega, who was the granddaughter of the Baal Shem Tov, the daughter of Adol, who is the primary descendant that we're familiar with of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, his famous daughter Adol, that there are so many stories about. And therefore, his whole childhood growing up, he just heard stories of tzaddikim. And that gave him tremendous passion and chizuk and inspiration to serve Hashem until with time he did manage to attain the levels that he attained. And so this is incredibly important, Be'ezus Hashem, for all of us as parents. In education, stories. It's so crucial to be learning stories about the different tzaddikim, and to be giving that over to our students and to be giving that over to our children. It can be very, very, very powerful for them to serve as a catalyst, that they should know there were people like that. Like, that's what it always comes down to. All of our difficulties and struggles with the human experience, at the end of the day, there was a person called Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. He really did exist. Like, there were tzaddikim like the Baal Shem and Rabbi Nachman. They were humans who really did it. So with all of the difficulties and the challenges, on the level that's compelling us to growth, it's very, very valuable to know that there were human beings that really, really reached extraordinary madrigas, and it wasn't because they were extraordinary per se, but it was because they believed that was possible. And they put in the effort that enabled them to reach the madrigas that they'll reach. Now, that doesn't mean that every one of us either can or should become a Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. We have our own sort of contexts where each of us is b'shvili nivra olam, living in our own relative world. But if we are inspired by these stories, and we are encouraged to hear that such levels are possible, then in our striving, like they say, you shoot for the moon, you might land on a star type of thing, we'll be able to reach where we're able to reach. But if we don't believe that such a thing is possible, then it's going to be much more difficult. So saying stories of tzaddikim allows our children and our students to understand that such a thing is possible. There were really angels among men, among women, who walked this world, great souls. And that's very powerful. And I'm remembering just now that my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, who was called Reb Shmelka Selisher, who was the first Klein in like the patriarchal line of the Ben Achar Ben from my father's side. So 5 greats up, Reb Shmelka Selisher, our son, Shmuel Shmelka is named after him, was an extraordinary tzaddik. He was a Rav and Av Beis Din in the town of, a number of towns, in Chust and Salish, in different areas in Hungary. And he was a student of the Chassam Sofer. He was a Talmud Chaver of the Ksav Sofer. Every week he would send a letter with Chidushei Torah to the yeshiva of the Ksav Sofer, the son of the Chassam Sofer, who would clap on the bima. He would bang on the stender in shul in the Beis Medrash in the yeshiva, and he would read out the letter. They would learn this letter as one of their limudim each week was the letter that was sent from Reb Shmelka of Salish. It's a very, very special tzaddik, and there's so many stories and different anecdotes, and he was a remarkable individual, remarkable person. And one year, the story is told that Reb Shmelka of Salish was traveling prior to Shavuos. Mamish, probably around this time, he was traveling maybe to fundraise or some other mission that he had in the neighboring villages in in Hungary rather. And he was supposed to make it back to the yeshiva in time for Shavuos. Obviously, in the yeshiva, Shavuos night is one of the centerpieces of the year, and they get to spend the whole night learning with the Rebbe and the Rosh Yeshiva, hundreds and hundreds of students, and he was due back in yeshiva for Shavuos. And it got closer and closer to Shavuos, and it became clear that there was some issue, and he was held up. And what had happened is that even though he had tried to get back to the yeshiva in time for Shavuos, somehow in the days leading up to Shavuos, the wagon broke. There was some kind of sabotage. He wasn't able to make it, and he ended up in a village that was known for people who were not scholarly at all. Mamish Amaratzim, people who they didn't know how to learn at all. They were totally illiterate. They were Jews, fine Jews even, went to shul, they daven, and simple people, Baal Shem Tov type Jews, but they didn't know how to learn at all. And so when he came back to the yeshiva after Shavuos, the Bachrim all gathered around him. They had heard that the Rebbe was stuck there for Shavuos. They said, we feel so terrible for you that of all the days of the year, Shavuos is the day of Torah. And I'm sure you had so much to teach and so much you wanted to learn and to delve into the depths of the deepest parts of Torah. And, who were you with? You were surrounded, so there's no one to learn with there. They don't know the Aleph base. Like, we feel so terrible. We were waiting for you in yeshiva, and you had to spend Shavuos with these kinds of people. And Reb Shmelka got very serious, and he told them, I want you to know that the whole night we learned Maaseh Merkava. We learned the part of Kabbalah, that Kabbalah is really split into 2 different parts. There's Maaseh Bereshis, the inner workings of creation, and then there's Maaseh Merkava, the workings of the chariot, which is the deepest part of Kabbalah. It's not even studied generally today because it's much more practical. Like, it actually deals with the names of angels and different shemos and how to manipulate them and how to create a golem and all these kinds of things that generally, even Mikubalim don't learn Maaseh Merkava, they learn Maaseh Bereshis. Now Maaseh Merkava is something else. And the students were dumbfounded. They were like, "What are you talking? These people? They don't know Chumash Rashi, and you're talking about Maaseh Merkava. How could it possibly be that you spent time over there learning Maaseh Merkava with these these Amaratzim, with these totally ignorant people? It's impossible. How could that be?" And he said, "Now let me explain." Said Reb Shmelka, he said, the whole night Shavuos we stayed up, and we the whole night we said stories about tzaddikim. And the Gemara tells us that the tzaddikim ha'avos hein hamerkava, that the avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but he expanded it to all tzaddikim, are the chariot of the divine. They carry the divine spirit inside of them. And because we spent the whole night Shavuos saying stories of tzaddikim, the whole night we learned Maaseh Merkava, which means that's also Torah. And again, Reb Shmelka Selisher was not a chassid. This is like a very chassidish story. He was not a misnagid, chas v'shalom. He was in the line of the Chassam Sofer, standard kind of approach. This is not the thing that you would expect necessarily, but he put the stories of tzaddikim not just on the level of Torah, but on the level of the deepest parts of Torah, of Ma'aseh Merkava. And so that's very powerful to understand and to appreciate just how impactful stories of tzaddikim can be. And we shouldn't overestimate it. We should be all the time, our Shabbos table should be full of stories. We should be telling our stories, our children, stories about tzaddikim, reading biographies of tzaddikim, and absorbing those stories for ourselves, so that we ourselves could have a little bit of an inkling as to how much there is for us to accomplish. And it really is possible for a human being to reach incredible levels in this world. All of this with the caveat that it shouldn't chas v'shalom discourage us. Sometimes you can learn, stories about tzaddikim, or you read biographies, and it can be very discouraging because you see how distant we are from that, and it really does feel impossible. And so the first thing is to realize we are not supposed to be them, right? And that's what I said before, like the famous story with Rebbe Zusha. Also, we have to incorporate some stories of tzaddikim once we're learning about that topic. But the story famously from Rebbe Zusha, who said that I'm going to go up after Shemaim, they're not going to ask me why I wasn't the Rambam, they're not going to ask me why I wasn't the Arizal or any other tzaddik, they're going to ask me why I wasn't Zusha. So we have to first be deeply, deeply rooted and anchored in our own self-worth, in our own recognition that we are pulling against our own unique burden. We have that much more tension that we're pulling against, and we're only going to be held accountable for how far along the journey we traveled that is unique to our own circumstances, our own challenges, our own experiences. And the same is true, we have to keep that in mind as it relates to learning the stories of tzaddikim, is that it's not because we're supposed to emulate them or replicate them, but it means that they strove and they were consistent, and it's the midos that sits beyond the accomplishments that all of us can take on for ourselves. The due diligence, the vision, the sense of hope that we really can accomplish. And when we apply those fundamental midos to our own experiences, we can accomplish tremendous things. We'll close. We're going to do a much shorter shiur today because the next piece is quite lengthy and I want to spend a lot of time on it. So let's just do one more short piece, and that will be our learning for today. Sichos Haran Kuf Lamed Tes 139. Siperli Echad Me'anashav. Rabbi Nassan says that one of the Hasidim of Rabbi Nachman, who had been close to the Rebbe before Rabbi Nassan came to Rabbi Nachman, which, remember, was just the last 8 or 9 years of Rabbi Nachman's life, and his life was very short, so it's just the last few years. So one of those Hasidim told Rabbi Nassan, Shapam Echad Sipur Rabbeinu Zal. One time, Rabbi Nachman had been speaking to this Chasid, and Shedibur La'ez a Shidduch, Va'amra Ish Hana Lefanav Shesham Ein Makam Lefanav. Rabbi Nachman had suggested a certain shidduch. In Siyadua, Rabbi Nachman was involved in shidduchim. Rabbi Nachman is called in Breslov the Shadchan HaGadol, and the almost throne that was created for Rabbi Nachman, which was taken apart piece by piece and smuggled out of Ukraine, and is currently housed in the Breslov of Mea Sha'arim, the primary original base medrash of Breslov in Eretz Yisrael, right on Rehov Mea Sha'arim. So Rabbi Nachman's chair, like the actual chair that Rabbi Nachman sat on, it's a fantastic chair. If you haven't seen it, to Google away, and you can see it on Google Images. Rabbi Nachman's chair, it's like wooden and it's sculpted, very, very beautiful. It was made for him as a gift. So that whole chair is the secret of shidduchim. It's all different animals and all the different interconnected weavings that bring each of these animals in pairs together, and it's connected with a story that Rabbi Nachman told, not for now, but Rabbi Nachman is known as the Shadchan HaGadol. So one time Rabbi Nachman was suggesting a certain shidduch for a certain person that would require them to move to a certain place, and the person said, that's not going to work, Shesham Ein Makam Lefanav. That's not his place. That place he's not going to be able to handle or to manage living there. It's not for him. Heishiv loy, Rabbi Nachman answered and responded that Kishi Yeshla Adam Leiv Shal Yisraeli, when a person has a Jewish heart, when a person's heart is saturated with emunah, and a person's heart is saturated with the realization that ein oid milvadei, that there's literally nothing but godliness, that malay chal aretz kavoided, that the whole earth is saturated with godliness, ein shaykh etz lemaka. This consideration of I can live here but I can't live there is not a consideration. Meaning we need to take it as a given that we if it's aligned with the will of Hashem, can make it anywhere. It's not like there's no, if that's where Hashem wants me, that's where I am. And that's where Hashem is. Because I'm a person, we can be people, like Rabbi Nachman is saying, a person says, I have a leiv shel Yisraeli. I have a Jewish heart that's full of emunah. And so, obviously, if there are extenuating factors and there are indicators that Hashem wants us to move on from wherever we happen to be living, okay, we heed them, we do our ashtadlus. But to reject out of hand the possibility of surviving in a particular setting, and this is not only true physically, but it's true circumstantially, it's true emotionally, it's true on every level. To reject out of hand, to say that I wouldn't be able to endure, Rabbi Nachman says that there's no ein shayach etzla makom. There's no concept like that by a Jew, ki alev halakus, because the heart is saturated with godliness, and a person then recognizes, like we say, hamakom menachem eschem, like the greatest consolation is the fact that hamakom, is the fact that wherever a person goes in life, whatever difficulty a person is facing, whatever challenge a person is experiencing, whatever failure a person is enduring, whatever is going on for a person, wherever they are, God is. There's no such thing as falling out of the system, because Hashem is hamakom. Hashem is that place. Hashem is the canvas upon which all of creation unfolds, and all the different colors and the lighter colors and the darker tones. It's all on the canvas of divinity. So Rabbi Nachman says, to respond to the suggestion of a shidduch by saying, it cannot be, even if every other factor aligns, because he can't live there. He says, wait, there's no such thing as can't. There's no such thing as can't. Ein shaykh etzla makom. The consideration of a particular place, it just doesn't apply to a person who's plugged into that aspect of emunah, like the tzaddikim say about Moshe Rabbeinu, who stood by the sneh, by the burning bush, and encounters HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the first time. Hashem comes and communicates with Moshe Rabbeinu, and Hashem tells him, Shal na'alecha me'al reglecha, remove your shoes from upon your feet, ki hamakom she'ata omed alav admas kodeshi, because the place where you're standing is holy ground. And the tzaddikim say that each and every Jew should hear the echo of that communication from Hashem each and every moment of life. Shahamakom sha'ata omed alav, the ground that we are currently standing on. And again, that's true physically where we happen to be, and it's true emotionally, and it's true spiritually. Wherever you are in this moment, Admas Kodesh. It's a holy place, because wherever you are is exactly, apparently, where you're supposed to be right now. Apparently, because that's where you are. And so this idea that, from this place I can't connect to Hashem, from this place I can't do tshuva, in this place I can't serve Hashem because I don't have the right infrastructure, community, in this relationship, in this school, in this, whatever setting it is, says Rabbi Nachman, it may be true that things need to be adjusted. And it could very well be that a person goes through the list of different factors and say, I guess it's time for us to move on. In whatever aspect, that could be true. But to preclude the possibility of connecting to Hashem from any makom, whatever that is, says the Rebbe, to a person who has a leiv shel Yisraeli, ein shaykh etzla makom. That's not true. That is not true. Because Hashem is the makom shel olam. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the place of the world. Everything that we experience unfolds within Him, and therefore wherever He puts us, it's part of emunah to know that it doesn't matter. There's a way for you to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu from where you are. And each and every one of us is expected to balance all the various factors of life, and then to make decisions based on the big picture of taking all the different factors into consideration. And then if a person needs to fundamentally alter their position in whatever way, whether it means to move from one place to another place, whether it means chas v'shalom to switch a relationship, if it's just not the right relationship, and there's elements that are not possible to endure, and there are things that, etc., along with every other factor that needs to be balanced. Hashem put the world into our hands. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to make decisions. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us that we should do our hishtadlus. But all along the process, each and every step needs to be taken with the awareness that if I'm here now, then hamakom sha'ata omed alav admas kodesh. Then right now where I am, this is a holy place. And this is a lechatchila. This is where I was always ever supposed to be. This is exactly how it is supposed to be. And my task now is to figure out how can I use this experience to connect to Hashem as best as I can, and then to move forward with a view of the past, a deep rootedness in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, and then the future. And I posted earlier in this week, I think maybe it was yesterday morning, I wrote up an idea that came to me on Shabbos, which we say in Yehi Chavod every single morning, where we make reference to these three elements of Hashem's presence: Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimlech La'olam Vayed. Hashem is king, Hashem was king, Hashem will be the king forever and ever. And it just struck me that if you think about these three tenses, Melech, Malach, Yimloch, so it emerges that the first revelation of Hashem's kingship, which exists apparently across the whole spectrum of past, present, future, but the first reference is in present tense. The first thing we say is Hashem Melech. Hashem is currently Melech. Right now in my life, I'm currently under Hashem's Malchus. Hashem is my king. Then we say Hashem Malach, he was, and then we'll say Hashem Yimlech. And so it just struck me, the whole time we're trying to work on the past and we're trying to improve ourselves in the future. Step one is to root ourselves in the present. And the first thing is to say with total confidence, Hashem Melech. Hashem is real. Hashem is here. Everything that's going on in my life is exactly how it's supposed to be. I have a makom. This is a good makom where I can connect to Hashem. I have a leiv shel Yisraeli, like Rabbi Nachman says, or ein shaykh etz l'makom, a leiv that's full of emunah, a leiv that's full of einoid malvadai, and the realization that this whole world is a process. History is a process. Our lives are processes that unfold, and every single stage is necessary. And if this is where I am, so it's not the end of the road. It's not, but it's exactly where I'm supposed to be along the unfolding process. That's true. When a Jew roots him or herself in Hashem Melech, then in the present moment, Hashem's kingship is accessible. Then we can look back and say Hashem Malach. We can look back at all the moments that we experienced along the journey in the past and say, Hashem was there too. He must have been, because I couldn't get where I am now if I hadn't gone through those experiences. And if I'm saying that exactly where I am is Hashem Melech, so then certainly Hashem Malach. Then Hashem was there too. And that gives us the unshakable conviction and confidence to be able to say, Hashem Yimlech La'olam Vayed. No matter what I go through in life, no matter where I find myself, no matter what I'm dealing with, no matter what circumstances I encounter, Hashem Yimlech. Hashem is there because Hashem is the makom, and there's no greater nechama than hamakom yinachim eschem. There's just no greater consolation than knowing that really Hashem is everything there is. And that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with me, no matter where I am, no matter what I go through, no matter what sense of loss a person might nebuch feel. It's just reminding me, one of our very, very consistent members of the Chabura, this incredible woman who really has been learning with us for a long time. So unfortunately, sadly, her mother was niftaris today, and as an aliyah for neshama, just at the end of the shiur, I'm going to mention her name, even though the shiur that was sponsored was really tonight's shiur, and we'll mention it again. But this shiur will Be'ezus Hashem be a Eloi neshama for Esther Bas Moshe, Aleh Hashalom, and Be'ezus Hashem, Hamakom should be Yinachim Oscha and Osa, and Bracha and her family should receive the nechama that they need. But this is the nechama, is to know that no matter what you go through in life, no matter what you're experiencing, if a person has a leiv Yisraeli, Hashem is there. Hashem is present in that. That gives you the ability to recognize that Hashem was always with us. Hashem Malach, and Be'ezus Hashem, Hashem Yimloch La'olam Vayed. Okay, so we're gonna end a little bit earlier today, and Be'ezus Hashem, next week's shiur will be on a very, very important, crucial topic that we're going to learn a lot more sources than sort of just the Sichos Haran sources from inside. It's Sichos Haran Kuf Mem, and we're going to learn from a lot of the tzaddikim on a crucial topic of believing in ourselves and what that means to have emunah, not just in Hashem, not just in tzaddikim, but emunah in ourselves as well. That will
שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי, מלך חי וקיים, על כל נשימה שאני